Hi friends, it's me, Em again, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things sinister. If you are interested in true crime or if you like all things horror related, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you can join me for some morbid conversation. Now today's going to be a first for me. Today I feel compelled to give you guys a trigger warning. Usually I don't bother because I figure if you're here for true crime and you're here for horror, you kind of know what you're getting into. It's not really a secret, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. But this story is the first story that gave me such a visceral reaction that I feel compelled to warn you just how horrific it is. Now, with that being said, it does involve the death of an infant, and while no death is particularly pleasant, this one is truly horrific. And so if that's something you don't think that you can handle, something that you don't think you can stomach, I totally understand if you need to back out right now because it's pretty bad. With that being said, today's chat is going to be about Dena Schlosser. And before we get to her horrific climax, we need to start at, well, the beginning. And her beginning had a lot of ups and downs. When she was 8 years old, she was diagnosed with a condition called hydrocephalus. And what that is a buildup of cerebral spinal fluid inside of your brain, which causes pressure. Now, this pressure can lead to physical ailments such as headaches, vomiting, dizziness, off balance. It also can cause mental issues such as a change in your personality or even just general mental impairment. Now, at a young age, she had several shunts put in throughout her body to help with the drainage of this fluid. And in my research, it didn't say definitively whether or not Dena had any long-term effects of this problem. But I do think it's worth noting because long-term effects can happen with this, both the physical as well as some mental. So I think it's just worth noting that those issues were happening early on. As Dena got older, she did end up going to New York, where she attended Marist College. And there, she not only got her bachelor's degree in psychology, of all things, but that's also where she met her future husband, John Schlosser. The two of them, when they got married, would end up moving from New York to Texas, where Dena would live as a housewife and an eventual stay-at-home mom to their two daughters, Brianna and Kelsey, while John worked. While they were in Texas, the couple ended up finding a church called the Water of Life Church, and they developed an almost obsessional level of commitment to this church. So much so that it wouldn't be anything for them to make the 120-mile round trip to this church several times a week to attend services and different activities. Now, John ended up losing his job, and therefore they ended up losing their home because they weren't able to pay the mortgage on it. And the couple specifically picked an apartment to move the family into because of its proximity to the church. The Water of Life Church was run by Pastor Doyle Davidson, and from my research, he mainly talked about two things. And one was that the city of Plano, Texas, where the church was located, was infested with the spirit of Jezebel. And the second thing he would talk about is that all physical ailments, mental ailments, could be cured through the power of prayer, and all ailments needed to be prayed about, but that medicine was the devil. You should not take medicine. You should just give your ailments to God and pray about it. Dena did end up latching on to Doyle and having an obsession with him, just like she did with the church. Unfortunately, because of the hold that this pastor and this church had on the couple, it would ultimately lead to disaster because Dena would end up refusing medicine that she desperately needed. But we'll get to that in a bit. Things ended up taking a downhill turn when the couple ended up pregnant with their third child, Margaret. A lot of times when it comes to children and with pregnancies, it's a happy time for a lot of people. Unfortunately, Dena dealt with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. I'm sure there's a lot of moms on here who have maybe struggled with that themselves. I know that I did. While Dena did struggle with postpartum depression and anxiety a little bit with her first two children, it was nothing on the level of what she was experiencing with her third. It seems like her downslide started almost immediately, as Dena had told people that she had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl, but that the boy passed away during childbirth. And the reason why I point that out was because there is no proof that there was a second child. It seems to have been something that was in Dena's head. Just one day after the birth of Margaret, Dena actually cut her wrists while she was in the bathroom. Now, some sources say that it was strictly because of her postpartum depression, while other sources say she had been reading the Bible and the word cut had jumped out to her on the page, and she took that as a challenge to see if she could cut herself and if God would in turn heal her. Now, no matter what her motivation was, her husband John is the one who found her, and rather than take her to the hospital for her pretty severe injuries, he chose to just bandage her up and pray about it. Her general depression would end up shifting from depression to psychosis. And it was just 5 days after the wrist cutting incident that Dena would walk into the living room where her daughter was watching a cartoon. And she believed that the cartoon characters on the screen were laughing at her, which caused Dena to run out of the house. Now, her daughter did try to chase after her, but her daughter was 5, and her daughter didn't end up catching up to her. Police did end up catching up to Dena, and she screamed at the police. Now, after things calmed down, she did end up testing positively for postpartum psychosis, and she ended up getting admitted into a state hospital, a mental care facility. While at the facility, she was prescribed medication to help with her psychosis, and it did help drastically. She wanted to stay at the facility for a little while longer, but her husband John wanted her to come back home. So, kind of against her choice, she ended up leaving the facility. For the first few months after she left, CPS was observing her like crazy. She wasn't supposed to be alone with her kids. She actually had a relative come in and stay with her, and she continued her medication. After a few months, she was seen as not a danger to her kids, not a danger to her family, and CPS backed off. Unfortunately, when they backed off, Dena stopped taking the medicine, and she stopped taking the medicine because despite the fact that it made her feel better, medicine was evil, and all ailments should just be given to the Lord and prayed about. And so that's what she did. Her and her husband were so consumed by the teachings of this church that despite it making her feel better, she went off the medication. And unfortunately, when she went off the medication, her psychosis returned. And it would get progressively worse and worse. One day when Dena was getting ready with the family to go to church, she was getting Margaret dressed and ready. And once she was dressed, she took her out there to her husband, John, and told John that she thought that they were supposed to allow this infant daughter of theirs to marry Doyle Davidson, their pastor. To which John kind of pushed the idea down, kind of shrugged it off and pushed the idea off her head, but more or less kind of just blew it off as just a weird thing that Dena had said. He didn't report it to the authorities. He didn't mention it to CPS. He kind of just pushed it aside. The next day, Dena approached John with a new idea, saying that she thought that this time they needed to give their baby to God, and didn't really elaborate very much. And he again brushed that idea off and just kind of ignored her on it. She mentioned it multiple times that day, and each time he just kind of shrugged it off. Again, never reported it, never said anything to anybody about it. He just kind of was like, okay, whatever, you're being kind of bizarre, but whatever. He just went to bed that night, not really thinking anything of it. The next day was November 22nd, 2004. And Dena woke that day, and John went to work, and Dena felt the same compulsion that she needed to give this baby to God, this 10, 11-month-old baby, not even a year old yet. And she sat down and she started watching the news, and some of the news headlines made her feel like that was God's sign that the end times were near, and that they were living in the end times. And she interpreted that as God telling her to give him her baby. And so what she chose to do was to go to the kitchen and pick out the longest knife that they had. It was like a 9-inch blade. And she took that knife to Margaret and had cut both that baby's arms off at the shoulders. I have been haunted this whole week researching this story by what I can imagine that would sound like. I cannot imagine cutting a baby's arms off at the shoulders. She did end up calling her husband and very calmly told him what she did. She wound up on the phone with 911 and again, very calmly told them what she did with gospel music just playing in the background. When police got there, she very calmly told them what she did. She was still holding the knife at that time. She was covered in blood. The police would end up going to the back room where Margaret was laying in her crib. They would end up rushing her to the hospital, and unfortunately, she would end up passing the next day due to blood loss from having both her arms cut off at the shoulders. She had told her doctors that God had told her to cut the baby's arms off and to also cut her own arms off. But she wound up with her arms. She didn't lose her arms, just the baby's. Dena ended up having 2 trials. The first one was deadlocked by the jury and didn't go forward. The second trial, the judge actually said that Dena had met the standard for insanity in the state of Texas. And that standard in Texas is basically whether or not you know the actions you committed were wrong. And because of that, she was found not guilty due to reason of insanity. Dena was sentenced to a state mental hospital on April 7th, 2006. However, she was released in December 2008, but she was recommitted in April of 2010, but she was re-released again in 2011. Her husband did end up getting a psych eval, and it did show that he had narcissistic personality traits, but they held no responsibility towards him for this outcome, for this situation. Which, not that I am trying to put the surviving daughters through anymore and say that they deserve to lose both parents, but the fact that he literally watched his wife's mental health deteriorate and watched her slip into this depression and anxiety and eventual psychosis, and he did nothing about it. He did nothing. It just blows my mind. And he filed for divorce, and he was granted divorce from Dena. And in their divorce, he was granted sole custody of the kids, and Dena is not allowed to have any contact with those surviving kids. I'm not saying that that's right or that's wrong, but the fact that he didn't even get scrutinized for watching her spiral down this crazy mental health spiral is just insane to me. Maybe that's not the best choice of words, but honestly, that's really the only outcome long term that Dena has faced from this, other than, the guilty conscience that I'm sure she has from killing her baby and losing her other two children. She's not got a conviction on her record. She's not got a felony on her record. She's divorced and she's lost her kids. And she has a little bit of trouble finding work because of her history. I really hate cases like this, not only because, it's an awful case. Like I said, I have had to take so many breaks while researching this and writing the script for this and filming this because the mental imagery that I have from just this story is awful. You guys know I'm a mom. I have two little girls myself, and these cases with kids just they hit different when you're a parent. I've been into true crime a lot. My whole adult life, I've been into horror and I've been into true crime, and things with kids hit different when you have kids. That's just a fact. Even beyond the true crime, I read a lot of horror fiction too, and stuff like Cujo rips my soul out now that I'm a mom. When I used to be able to read it, no problem. Pet Cemetery, used to be able to read it, no problem. And now that I'm a mom, rips my soul out. I'm not trying to say that this isn't a sad story if you're not a parent, but when you are a parent, it hits different. You think of kids differently and it hurts harder. It hurts, at least with me, it hurts me harder because I feel more of a connection. And but I hate these stories because of that. The story itself is awful. It's awful what this baby went through. But also, I am a huge advocate for mental health. I'm a huge advocate for treating it like standard healthcare and getting help when you need it and taking medicine when you need it. I am such a huge advocate for recognizing mental health as being just as serious as physical health. And it is obvious that this was a psychotic break from this woman. Now, granted, she chose to stop her medicine. That is a choice that she made. But you also have to wonder if a person is in that kind of mental fragility. I don't want to say can they be trusted to even make the choice to continue to take their medicine. But you know what I mean? Like, what she did was an awful thing, but is it 100% her fault? Is it 100% her choice? I don't think she should have gotten the death penalty. I don't think that she should have been sent to prison for it. I'm not even saying that, but the fact that she is walking around free after doing this horrific thing has me so split because I don't believe that she did it willingly and of sound mind. But also, there's personal responsibility. She did do it. So, what is the happy medium here? My husband and I have been talking a lot about it. There is no right answer. I don't think there's a right answer. Should she have been in a mental health care facility for longer? Should she have been in a mental health care facility for life? Should they have taken whatever her prison time would have been and converted it to a mental health facility? I don't know what the right answer is. It's horrible though. And if she's any kind of mother, that thought of what she did should haunt her for the rest of her life. And if she's any kind of mother and any kind of human, That's probably a pretty severe punishment if you ask me. Anyway, let me know what your judgments would be. Would you put her in a mental care facility for the rest of her life? Would you give her a short mental health care facility sentence like what she got? She was basically sentenced until they thought that she would be rehabilitated, and then she was let go. My thing is, though, was she rehabilitated for real if she ended up getting recommitted multiple times? Maybe her stay should have been a little bit longer. But what do you guys think? Should she have gotten prison time? Should she have gotten the death penalty? Was her punishment fair? I don't know, but I'm interested to see what you guys think. So this has truly been awful, and this story has definitely put a damper on parts of my week anytime I have been researching or writing about it. So make sure you make it worth my time and drop some comments down below on what you think. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on the post notification bell. That way you can be prepared to join me for the next time we sit down to have a chat. And until then, I will see you guys later. Take care, be safe,